Welcome everybody. Yes, it's Christmas. We know you don't have a lot of time, but nevertheless, our marathon has to go on. And therefore, we are very, very, very happy to have a guy here whose taste is, first of all, not only highly eclectic, but whose band also does music, which is, on the one hand, not really easy to get, but on the other hand, very, very addictive. So we're very happy to have Robin from The Ocean here on the show. Robin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. So as we try to do everything a little different this year and try to have a few more topics in these 9 interviews, we asked Robin to come up with 10 records that are pretty useful to describe his musical journey. And don't worry, guys, afterwards we'll also, of course, talk about The Ocean. So, Robin, how hard was it to pick 10 records?
Challenging, of course. I mean, yeah, I think I suck at curating because I have a hard time taking decisions, which always means, as we just spoke about, excluding things that are important or significant, and you can totally get lost in that. I would be a very terrible DJ, I think, because I would just think too much about what to play next, and that's not good.
And then all of a sudden you have breaks in between 2 tracks. What to play? Yeah. So yeah, you said that your musical journey started early, ended early. So let's have a look at the records that you chose. What is the oldest one that you chose?
The oldest record I picked here is from 1991, which makes it 30 years. It is
32 years by now.
Yeah, I'm 44. In 1991, I was around 13 years old maybe, and about the time I discovered heavy music, which initially happened through Guns N' Roses. in full transparency. Yeah. It was my first real rock show ever, was seeing Guns N' Roses live in Hanover, and that was actually must have been 1991 at the Use Your Illusion World Tour, and but there was already like a little bit after the peak of my appreciation of that band. At that time I started discovering other things. I also was a lot into early 90s hip-hop, and then the Judgment Night sampler happened, and through that I discovered Helmet from their collaboration with House of Pain. It was like this weird time when metal and what was back then called rap artists were collaborating, and it was not weird or embarrassing. It was actually kind of making sense. So there was like the famous Slayer and Ice-T collaboration, and Helmet did a track with House of Pain, Just Another Victim, and through that I discovered Helmet, and they released Meantime that same year, 1991, and that was an important record, the first one I picked here, for many reasons. It was heavier than what I had been listening to up until that point, and it was already a quite how to say, like a combination of complexity and groove was there that was pretty much ahead of its time, and that really stuck with me. Like it had somehow like the groove of hip hop, and at the same time the heaviness of like metal or heavy rock, and I think it's a record that has aged pretty well, actually. It's maybe not sound wise so much, but I mean that's true for pretty much every record from the 90s, but it still feels like there's some really interesting tracks and riffs, very good riffs on that record. And at that time, I also started picking up my guitar, and was very comfortable just playing drop tunings and, you know, riffs that I could play with one single fucking finger. My skills weren't that great at that time. So yeah, I was sitting down figuring out Helmet tracks, and it's kind of like how it all started.
Did you then also like the 2 records in the 90s that followed, Betty and Aftertaste?
I did, though. I had trouble getting into Betty. Like back then, I thought it was not as good. I was missing something, but like I started appreciating it later in hindsight more than at that time, actually. But that's also because it was this time when a lot of things were happening. I was a teenager. Everything was just like galloping, and you were discovering new things all the time.
Yeah.
And like most of these records were like stepping stones into something else, you know. And I think that was the case here as well. Like Meantime just came at the right time, and it opened my eyes to something, but it didn't make me like it didn't make me focus on Helmet as a band as much as I had been previously obsessed with Guns N' Roses as a 12-year-old. There was new things happening soon after that. And yeah.
Yeah, and I also think the visual appeal or the shock moment towards mom and dad is much bigger with Guns N' Roses than with Page Hamilton and John Stanier. I mean, like, there is a reason why
Exactly.
Hamilton once said that you don't have to look like shit to be punk. Yeah, but it's interesting that you pick Meantime, because that is also one of those records which is like a watershed mark for the band, because up to then, much noisier. After that, more groove. Interesting choice. I like that. So let's go on. What is like, we don't have to go in chronological order, but what is the next record that you chose?
No, I guess it makes sense in chronological order. Moving forward, because one thing led to another, but something, yeah. The next album I picked is something completely different, a record we all know, and I guess almost all of my friends that are somehow into heavy music these days appreciate it, although it's something completely different, is Portishead Dummy. That came out in 1994, I believe, or was it 93? Yeah. I think it was 94. And that was a record I don't think I listened to any other album as much as to that album up until my 20s or mid-20s. I kept going back to it. There was something that just enthralled me, and you know, like, that sucked me in, and it made me go back to it over and over again. It was certainly hitting the nerve of this sad teenager, but it was also a very mature record at the same time, and a very genuine record, and quite different from a lot of the heavier stuff I was listening to at the same time. So it was the time I discovered hardcore, and here maybe we should talk about the third record at the same time, because it's so different.
Okay, so what is the third record?
Would be Sick of It All. Sick of It All, Just Look Around. Same year, 1994, same year as Portishead released Dummy, and obviously a totally different affair. So there was like the part of me that was into getting into heavier stuff, and yeah, just like, you know, slowly getting into hardcore through Sick of It All. I saw them live in Hamburg around that same time, 1994. Strife from LA were opening, and they introduced me to the whole straight edge realm. And so there was this, me being intrigued by heavy bands with a positive message, playing very heavy music. And at the same time, there was the minimalism and the beauty and darkness of Portishead, you know. And I think when you look at it from what I did with my own music, then it kind of makes sense, because it has aspects of both of these very different worlds in it somehow. There is certainly the trip hop elements that you can also hear on Holocene, and the darkness and the minimalism and the reducing and a musical idea to its absolute essentials that is coming from that end. And there is also the riffs and the heaviness and the complexity of things I was listening to around that time from the heavier end. And so that was the year 1994. There were heaps of other great records coming out that same year, if you think about it, but like I said, it's very difficult to just pick a few. And we're going to move forward in steps of about 2 years now to make sure we don't just end in 1924, because we could also just talk about 10 records from that year.
Easily, right? Easily. Yeah, totally. So you say 3 years, and when we're in 97, what is the record or V records from 97?
96, actually. 2 years. Let's stick with 2 years. So 96, Converge Petitioning the Empty Sky.
Okay.
That was continuing the evolution of getting into more complex, heavy stuff for me. And it's again a record that has aged very, very well, I think. Like I can still listen to a song like the opening track, The Saddest Day, which they used to play live for years. I've seen them. It's probably one of the bands that I haven't ever toured with that I've seen live the most times, at least 10, 15 times. And they used to play that as the closing track for a long time, even like not so long ago. And it has aged very well, I think. And that record was, for me, was really ahead of its time. It was coming out of the hardcore scene, but it was much more than that. It was very metal. First of all, it was very complex and very abrasive and just like crushingly heavy, but not in a hard to say, like not in the same way that I was used to or that I was listening to at that time. I had been listening to heavy bands like Unbroken, for example, you know, was one of those early straight edge bands. It was really heavy, but they were still more like on the groove side of things. And Converge were bringing in those like really fast parts and the really technical guitar parts also, and like really just noisy riffing and yeah, so that really opened my eyes. And that, like, we're talking 1996, you know, and like I think I discovered them. I bought a 7-inch record. I was in the States at that time I did like a high school exchange year where I lived with a diehard Baptist creationist host family in Florida. It's totally fucked up. And there was absolutely nothing going on. And I was super happy to actually go to the States where a lot of my favorite bands were coming from, you know, expecting that, oh, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be in the middle of like the coolest hardcore scenes in the world. And
yeah, especially Florida death metal at the time. I mean, come on.
Right, exactly. But that was all like, I mean, the death metal scene was in Orlando and like further south. And I ended up in the north, like in Jacksonville, the far north. And it was one of the, it's one of the biggest cities in the state, but there was absolutely nothing going on except surf punk. And I was totally lost. And in the end, it was a good experience because I started setting up shows myself and I started writing my own fanzine and connecting with people through that. And this is also how I discovered Petitioning the Empty Sky and some people from Massachusetts and from the north, the New England hardcore scene at that time. And yeah, there were lots of very, very exciting bands coming out that time on Hydrohead Records. Obviously, bands like Cable or Colas or, you know, like Botch. Obviously, it's an album I haven't picked here, but I feel bad about it. American Nervoso was definitely like a super important record and very related to Converge's Petitioning the Empty Sky, but that came out 6 years earlier. Keep that in mind. And
that is mind-blowing album. Right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And the same year, to again give you a very contrasting album that I discovered the same year, Tori Amos' Boys for Peely.
Oh yeah.
Again, feeding my teenage angst and sadness. Obviously, an incredible voice, that lady, and beautiful piano playing. And it's also a record I listened to a lot, and I just got really, really, really into. And yeah, never ever got to see her live, so it was an appreciation from a distance somehow. But I guess looking at these records, I realized that these very disparate worlds for me were of equal importance somehow. You know, like I wasn't listening to Converge more than to Tori Amos. So yeah, that was 1996. And I guess the next one is still a 1996 record. So let's surf on that year for a little more.
And it is
Swan's soundtrack for the blind.
Oh yeah,
that album changed a lot. Like yeah, especially this silver half of it with this 20 minutes track that is just starting mellow and turning into this noise orgy. And Jabo's amazing voice, somehow connecting it with the, you know, like the beauty that I was into, but at the same time having the heaviness and the very disgusting lyrical realm, and like just that choking intellectual heaviness that I've always loved about Michael Gira's lyrics. That was a big discovery for me, and something that also opened my eyes. And another band that I did not see live at that time. I think the first time I saw Swans was in Berlin at Volksbühne many years ago, at a seated show at a theater. That was also an incredible experience, but it was like years after, like maybe 2010 or something like that must have been, or 2008. And and then I saw them at Dunk Festival a couple of years ago, and it was just too fucking loud. I couldn't take it. They were headlining at the end of a festival. Everyone was tired. It was so fucking loud that I left it. I surrendered. I left the tent. I couldn't take it.
Yeah, but it's interesting. That's something that our webmaster also said. He was happy to see them in Heidelberg a few years ago, which is like an hour and 10 from us. And he said, I left after 2 tracks, it was already 90 minutes and my ears were bleeding.
Yeah, that's what you get these days.
Yeah. But I interrupted your thought. What were you about to say?
No, that was pretty much it. There was already 3 albums for 1996. Maybe fast forward, like one album that Swans record led to was New Roses with Times of Grace 3 years later, 1999. Though I was listening to them already at that time, Enemy of the Sun, but it really clicked with me with Times of Grace. That album was just of another world, really. And the fact that it came out with this parallel album by their alter ego project, Tribes of Nurod. That was also something that I found very interesting. And I remember listening to that at my parents' place when they were gone. Like brought up my
when they were gone, important.
Room. Yeah, of course. Brought up my stereo into their living room and set up these 2 stereo systems, and these records back to back simultaneously. And Tribes of Nurod's Grace album was mostly ambient stuff, so you didn't even have to press play. We're talking about CD players, all at the same time. Even if there was like a slight delay, it didn't matter because it just felt like it was intentional, So it was really cool, and I was experimenting with that and listening to these records. Like at the same time coming out of 2 different sound systems. I was like, holy shit, no one's ever done that before, And and then I got to see New Roses live in Berlin. I was not living in Berlin at that time. I drove there for like 3 hours in midwinter with a friend, and they played at a place called Razzle Dazzle which was near Ostbahnhof must have been 1999 or maybe 2000. And they played with Today's the Day, another band I should mention here, but not part of my list, who had just released Temple of the Morning Star and Voivod. And that show was something I had never seen before. It was so violent, and it was the time when they had these visuals with people getting shot, and everything was just very fucking negative and brutal. And the total antithesis to my appreciation of heavy music up until then was coming out of the hardcore scene, which was always with a positive message, and unity and people looking out for each other, animal rights. I was vegan, and this was like the dark side of heavy music, really, like the bad side basically. But there was an allure I couldn't resist, and the whole, like the fact that they like this whole album was like a piece of music that you would listen to from the beginning to the end. And live it was the same. There was no pauses in between songs. Everything was connected, and it was just like they were conjuring up this movie, and you couldn't just like escape, And that was something that really shaped me. Like walking out of that room after that show, I felt transformed, and inspired to, I was like, I want to do something like this, like, yeah. So very, very important this double record, Times of Grace and Grace. But now I skipped 2 because I fast forwarded from Swans, Soundtrack for the Blind. And what I skipped was, of course, Refused with Shape of Punk to Come in 1998.
That is also on my list, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, hard to ignore that record. I mean, again, coming out of the hardcore scene, but going much beyond, with all these elements of very different genres of music, that when you put it on paper or try to say what it is, it sounds absurd, but somehow it worked out, you know. And that was really a record that was obviously way ahead of its time. And I had the chance of seeing Refused live multiple times through the 90s when they were still a straight edge hardcore band. In 96 or 97, I saw them twice. And then they came back with this album, and they had transformed into this band that was just a totally different entity, you know, like the way everyone was dressed, starting with that, which was very polarizing for us hardcore kids, but somehow they were just like so ahead of everything that was going on at that time, you know. And
which is interesting, right? Which is interesting because Dennis himself said that in a way they were simply ripping off Nation of Ulysses, right? Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah. Did you also see and you saw them on the last tour with that record?
I believe it was the last tour. Yeah, I saw them in Cologne, and I also saw them in Bielefeld in 1999. It was shortly before they broke up. Yeah. So they did play Shape of Punk to Come tracks, and then the whole story ended tragically, as we all know. But yeah, that's a band that has been with me since 95, 96, since their new school hardcore days, where they were a good band, but they were also just another band, you know. And with this album, they opened the doors to so much more for me personally, and I all of a sudden saw how you can integrate strings into heavy music, or jazzy parts, or math, what was later called math rock parts. And like everything is allowed, you know, like there is no such thing as an absurd idea in the realm of creativity. Like try it, and if it feels genuine, and then by all means go for it. They did that, you know, like, and they proved excellence with how they did it. And they wanted a lot. It was very pretentious, but it was also something that attracted me because they were challenging the intellectual conservatism in the scene in many ways. And in that they were very polarizing, but I always felt that this is what we need in order. This is what I want from art. I want to be, I want to question things. I want to be made aware of stereotypes, and you know, think about them, and reject them. And I want my eyes to be opened, and emotionally I want someone to take out my guts and turn them upside down and plant them back into my belly. You know, this is what I expect from looking at art. And they did that. And they really, they were a very, very important band for me. And with this record, will be forever for sure. So
do you like their newer stuff, like Freedom, that came out after the hiatus?
I have not listened to it so much, to be honest, but I think it's a good record. It is clearly Refused at the level of where they were back then. And I also have to say that they broke up in dignity, and created a myth that I honestly believe they did not do that for any intentions of, you know, going on a hiatus and then coming back and making a lot of money. They were at a point where they were dead, and they broke up in a genuine way. And they also came back in a genuine way. For me, like, it's like so many years later, things change, and they felt like playing these tracks again, and they have every right to do that. And even if 4,000 people come now to Columbia Halle, where I saw them at Tommy Weisbecker house in front of like 150 kids, that's beautiful, you know. Like, I have no hard feelings about that at all. And but I'm in a different place now, so that's why I didn't really listen much to the comeback record, but maybe I should put it on after this.
I still remember I saw one of the last shows on that last tour before the hiatus in Belgium. And I then saw one of the first shows when they got back together again in Belgium at a festival. And I must admit that up to a certain degree, the level of execution was better in 2013 when they got back together, because they were more experienced and everyone was on point. I mean, like, I don't want to say that they were not on that last tour before the hiatus, but one could see that in a way, that little lapse of time had a good and positive effect. There were no hard feelings anymore in the band. Everybody was happy with playing together, and yeah, that was a cool thing to see. And I also, just like you said, they left at their peak and they came back strong, and that's something that not a lot of bands can say about themselves. For example, the Pixies. I don't think the Pixies can say that about themselves, but that's just my opinion. So now we have, like, what, 7 records, I think, on your list?
I think we're almost. I think there was already more. There's 2 missing here that we haven't spoken about. There is Massive Attack with Mezzanine in 1998 that came out around the same time as Refused with Shape of Punk to Come.
Yeah,
and that was also another record that was way ahead of its time, and that has aged incredibly well, that I still listen to a lot these days. And continuing my love for trip hop and like very slow minimalist electronic music that I had already discovered at that time, long before actually. That record made a big impact on me, and I think there is a certain heaviness to that record that that drew me to it, a certain darkness and a certain heaviness, but obviously orchestrated with entirely different means than like the metal and rock bands I was listening to at that time. But it's an emotional heaviness, and that's something that really like sucked me in and made me play that record over and over again. And I think there are some bands who have tried to cover songs from that album, and it tends to work on a surface level where you think, yeah, that's exactly what I was always thinking. This is like this music can also function in the context of like heavy distorted guitars or in the context of a rock band, but at the same time, obviously not doing it justice ever. And I was tempted a few times to try myself, and then always said, nah, let this beautiful work of art exist in peace. Let me not fuck this up.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to see them live, because live, I've seen them twice, and I always had the feeling that live, it's much heavier than on the record. For example, a track like Inertia Creeps from that very record. Yeah. When they play that live, it's heavy. It's really heavy. Yeah. I mean, like, whoop.
Or Angel, like, it's just like such a dark and bleak track, you know, and it's brooding, and it's just like, holy fuck. Yeah, I actually have never seen them live. It's one of the things I totally missed out on somehow, but yeah, I hope that can still happen somehow.
So it's a bucket list thing.
It's definitely a bucket list thing.
Yeah, be careful with bucket list things. A few weeks ago, I ticked off, so for transparency for everybody, we're recording this last day of July. A few days ago, I ticked off one of my bucket list things and saw Springsteen at Hockenheimring. And the record is a 10 out of 10. But the whole experience is a 4 out of 10, because Hockenheimring is such a shithole. I wish them nothing but the worst. Yeah. Or as I said in the comment, I wish that a tidal wave washes an earthquake over them and that it bleeds to the ground. It's such a bad place. Also for music in general. But bucket list thing, Springsteen checked. Springsteen himself, awesome. And Massive Attack, I can only, when they come, go see them. They're really good. Robert is able to put on a show with his band that is really incredible. I've seen them once, like a solo show of theirs, and once at a festival, and both times amazing. So, but we have one more left on your list.
You're cutting out now.
Oh, am I back? I think I'm back. So we have one more on your list, right? So which one is it?
Yes, correct. Yeah, we're at the final record, and we have arrived in the year 2002 now. And this will be addressing you directly via the t-shirt you're wearing. It's Mono with One Step More and You Die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that album was my introduction to post-rock, my late introduction to post-rock. And it's obviously more than that. I mean, Mono have always been a heavy band as much as a post-rock band. And I had the chance of actually, we played live with them during that time with The Ocean. 2003, we played at a small Berlin venue called Magnet back then, supporting Mono. And that was the first time I saw them, and I had already discovered this album, and I was really looking forward to that. And it has the beauty of post-rock, but it also has the heaviness of like noise rock, and just like, yeah, like the kind of like ritualistic, repetitive buildup of intensity, that this band knows how to do like hardly any other band. And that was definitely a big introduction to many more good things to come from this band. Later, Hymns to the Immortal Wind for me was probably the one post-rock album I listened to more than anything else. But it all started with One Step More and You Die in I think 2002 or 2003, and very much influenced me at that time with what I wanted to do myself with The Ocean as well. So they're a very, very influential a band that managed to somehow combine like the beauty with destruction in a way that was not pathetic, but like just like genuine and beautiful. And so yeah, there you go. But we spoke earlier about Dredge. Cielo came out the same year. It would have also been a record I could have picked. That guy's voice and that drummer was just like something else, and I was listening to that pretty much back to back with Mono One Step More and You Die at the same time. So yeah,
when it comes to El Cielo, it's also always the live element. I've hardly ever seen a drummer as extrovert as Dino, who is not just simply drumming, but who also feels the need that whenever he has like a single second on his right hand to wave his drumstick in the air, and I'm like, okay. Or, as if drumming was not enough. Okay, I can drum with one hand and play the synth with the other. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You're just good at what you do. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward. We're having this Kickstarter at the moment, and they are writing new stuff, and they also already excused themselves for that damn collaboration with Dan the Automator, which I think didn't work. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really intrigued by what Dredge will sound like 20 years after El Cielo. What struck me about your list is that you very often mention bands, and you then mention those records like Sick of It All, Just Looking Around, or with other bands, with Neurosis and stuff like that. Is it also the way that once you discover these things, that you also go down the rabbit hole and, for example, check out bands like Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today on the one hand, or, other post-metal, post-rock stuff like Slint, Spiderland, or Mogwai, something like that. Did you also then go down these rabbit holes?
Of course. It's Sick of It All was my entrance ticket, but then I discovered the whole New York hardcore scene, and of course Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today, Side by Side, Judge, all these bands. they were Sick of It All were just opening the door, you know, and like all of these records that I picked were records that opened the door for me for a world that lied beyond to discover, you know, and yeah, so I definitely have that tendency to do that. When I discover something exciting, I want to know where it comes from and what else is there, doing something related or similar, and then there's no limits, you know. Then but that's the beauty of discovering music, and nowadays it has become so much easier just through algorithmic playlists and things like that, you know. Back then it was really also the pleasure of discovering things that were hidden, you know. It was like a treasure finding experience. Like you would buy a 7-inch record at a gig and it was awesome, and then your friends wanted to buy it but they just couldn't because you couldn't get it anywhere, you know. And you didn't know much about that band. You couldn't just like Google where they come from and like, you know, what type of background they have. Like, so it was all built around a lot of myths and intrigues. And yeah, I look at that with a bit of a, it was very romantic, you know. It was a very romantic time to listen to music and to discover music. And that is gone now that everything is available at you know, at your fingertips basically.
Yeah.
But I also don't condemn that. Like I think it's great. I have discovered a lot of great new things actually through random algorithmic playlists. Yeah. When you're sitting there and you're like, I shouldn't be liking this, but I do. What is it? You know, and yeah, this is our time where we are right now, and there's no point in rejecting that. And yeah, but it has, the fact that a lot of things have become easier has also taken away the pleasure of making an effort to find something and to do something, and that is a great pleasure and something we are kind of unlearning in a lot of ways these days. I think.
Yeah, there is less of an intrigue nowadays. I mean, like nowadays, you can find out too much too quickly, and you get bombarded too much without wanting to. But I know what you mean. You spoke about gateway bands, basically. Would you be proud if somebody called VeilofSound a gateway band?
Of course. I mean, yeah, that's a beautiful thing when something leads to something else and serves as a gateway or an entrance ticket to a hidden world. So of course, yeah.
I still remember, it was, I think, like 15 years ago, that a big German music magazine had a leading article in, I think, like 8 or 9 pages, where they were talking about thinking man's metal and talking about sludge and post metal, and they also featured you, VeilofSound, in that article. Would you say that, or would you nowadays still be happy if somebody said, okay, VeilofSound, that is sludge metal or post metal? Or as it seems that you've stated once, and I mean, like, the internet doesn't forget, once you must have said ambient soundtrack doom rock.
Wow, yeah, that must have been very long ago. Yeah.
Well, Discogs still has it as a description for you.
Right? All
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do remember it. Yeah, we were always being asked, like, what is it that you play? Like, sum it up in a nutshell. And I always sucked at that, you know. I always felt that also this shouldn't be my job to say what type of music is it that you're playing, but you always end up in these conversations, and you know, especially when the band isn't so well known, people want to know what it is, and they think in drawers and in categories, and you need to give them something to see, like to basically to fire up interest also, you know. And yeah, that was a weird term we came up with. It made no real sense, but anyways, there was something ambient in our music, something doom something rock, and we never really put the focus on metal. Although obviously there was a lot of metal ever since what we were doing, but somehow it sounded less cool or less intriguing. So we tried to stay away from the term.
Yeah. I mean, like being on the receiving side of music, or recepting and then reviewing side, I can see that people need drawers, especially nowadays. You know, there is too much, as we said, so you need like a drawer to put a band in. But I also noticed over the years that to put it in a drawer is more like our kind of job, because we see the finished product. Whereas for you, every song, I mean, like, of course, at one point you let it out into the world, but otherwise it's a very, very long process. And therefore, because of the longevity of a process, I think it's hard to put a name to it for a band. But
yeah, and then some things don't fit into certain drawers, you know. I mean, it depends on how many drawers you have, but like there's definitely bands that simply create their own drawer, and those were the bands I was usually like. The bands we talked about were all exclusively bands that did that, or artists that did that, you know, that defined the new environment for themselves and define their own category or their own drawer.
I mean, like, that's true. I mean, like, whichever band, maybe apart from Sick of It All, but whichever band you mentioned, that's totally true. I mean, like, look at Portishead and Massive Attack. These two, although their sound might, for the untrained ear, be very, very similar, yet they have a very different definition of trip hop on each side. And also, you know, like Mono, if you take Mono, of course, post-rock, clear. But I think they have a certain thing about them that makes them so clearly identifiable that there are hardly any other bands. And here we come to The Ocean. I would say that at a certain point, you also developed a very, very clear The Ocean sound. I like Fog Diver. I like also the singles before. I like Alien and Fluxion. But would you agree with me that Precambrian was the game changer in your discography?
I guess so, yeah. I guess so. I mean, it was a natural next step in evolution for us at that time.
Yeah.
But like it takes time to find yourself as an artist or a musician, and like that sometimes involves, I don't want to say detours, but like it involves experiments, and not all of these experiments go well. And that's part of the process of learning and of evolving and developing and shaping what it is that you're looking to express, you know. And when I look back at our early albums, then Fluxion and Aeolian were like stepping stones to Precambrian, and there were already some tracks on those records that I think worked really well, but they were still like in the whole process of the band was still like heading in a certain direction, and that direction was shaping up a lot more clearly with Precambrian. I do believe that, yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean, like, because you have named yourself back in the day The Ocean Collective, and we still find that on a lot of your items. But I think Precambrian was the last time when it was really that huge collective. I mean, like, when you look at the guest list of Precambrian, it's like a page. And although you have had guests afterwards, of course, it has never been as vast as on Precambrian. And then the question with that is, how hard was it to get Precambrian done?
It was a fucking nightmare. It was like one of the most exhausting projects and times of my life to make that record. It was a barrel without a bottom. Like it was never ending. From the organizational aspects you mentioned, with so many different musicians involved, to the writing, to the recording process, to the fact that the band back then wasn't really like a firm band. You know, it was like kind of, it was actually already the end of an era when we recorded Precambrian. The drummer that played on the record left the band shortly afterwards. The same goes for the bass player, and we didn't have a fixed guitar player at that time. I recorded all the guitars except a few extras that a guy recorded who did like one tour with us. So the band wasn't really like like an existing band. It was kind of like falling apart, in the process of falling apart on the lineup level, but at the same time musically, I was very inspired, and I had it felt very good when we were recording there. So it was this transitional phase, you know, and after that, we basically transformed into a band with a firm lineup after that, with the Swiss guys joining the band at the end of 2007 and early 2008, and that was the beginning of a new era. Also, when Loic joined, that was just after Precambrian, so it was like Precambrian was kind of like an introduction album, but also like a closure album at the same time. It was kind of like the last album of that early journey that we had embarked on. And like I said, it did definitely open a lot of doors for us. It was, I agree with you, one of the most important albums and milestones in our discography. But at the same time, it also needs to be said that it was like the closing of a chapter, you know, and the beginning of a new one. And yeah, making that record was fucking exhausting. Like, I spent a good year in the basement working on these tracks that started as initial ideas when I was traveling in Australia, and I wrote a lot of those tracks on an acoustic guitar, ironically, like the very basic ideas, and then fleshed them out over the coming months in Berlin in my dungeon. And then we recorded drums in the north of Finland. We booked 3 weeks there in a studio in the middle of nowhere. And then the rest, I basically all did at home in Berlin. And it was just a process that took forever. And then also getting all the guests involved made it even longer. So yeah, it was a tough one to make, for sure. There's like on Raiation, I remember there was over 150 tracks. It was an amount that at that time was it's still pretty ridiculous, to be honest, but especially at that time, hard to get to get the full picture, you know, to keep your focus on what's important. And I didn't know how to do that so well back then. I just like a lot of our mixing and recording process now is discarding ideas that are great, and that's something I have learned only later, to accept the fact that sometimes you have competing musical ideas. You need to decide what on one. You can't put them all in there, because then just one thing is going to distract from the other, and it's going to water down the impact of the other, you know. And with Precambrian, I was really struggling with that. I had all these ideas. I wanted them all to be in these songs, and I threw them all in there, and I was like, this is great. But it didn't make mixing that record easier, or like playing that record or understanding that record easier.
Yeah, like, oh, I want to have a carousel sound on Raiation. Okay, let's get it in.
Exactly.
Although I still have to say, if I had to pick 10 songs, Raiation is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a good track.
I have to be honest. That record for me was the opener to The Ocean, and that track still is. If anybody asks me what is The Ocean, I always say, like, okay, listen to this one. Take your, what is it, 12 minutes, sit down, don't think about anything else, turn off the lights, listen to that one, and you might have a slight hint on what the guys are about. But something that strikes me is you say that it was hard to keep a focus. How hard is it to keep a focus if you have such a strong concept? I mean, like, this concept of all the ages is it then applied onto the music, or is the music already written to the concept?
No, in this case, it was applied onto the music in hindsight.
Okay.
The only album where that was different was Pelagic. Pelagic was really written with the idea or the whole concept in mind, and specifically written like that. All other records, it was the music first, and then when I started writing lyrics, trying to arrange things in a way that the already existing music would kind of like match the conceptual backbone. And Precambrian was like that. It was a bunch of tracks that I had written over a relatively long time that didn't fit together, and this is how it became. This is why it became two records in the first place, because there were those short and heavy tracks that were reflecting one aspect or one realm that I was interested in back then, being the hardcore kid that I was, and the other thing was those more brooding, atmospheric, longer tracks that were bringing in a lot of different elements and that were not fitting together with the short, heavy hardcore tracks at all. Basically, I wanted to have two bands at that time, and I only had one. So, so this is what Precambrian is.
But I hope that now you're happy with that one little band that you have.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with it. I would still love to have another band where I can do completely different things, but I gave up on that idea because I just don't have the time for it anymore, unfortunately.
I mean, like not nagging a little bit here, but if you were to have a second band, and for everybody, he already said he's not gonna do it. Don't worry. But what kind of music would you be writing? Or would you like to do?
Well, that can change every year, or depending on where I am personally. But I can imagine very different things. I did have another band years ago called the Old Wind with my old friend Thomas from Breach, who also sang on Aeolian and on Precambrian. He was one of the guest vocalists. And that was something.
And who's now in Norna for everybody, just to drop enough names. And so
a great band. And so I tried that as a side project, and it was beautiful because it was very different from the Ocean in a way that it was just loud amps, plug and play, put in a cable, start playing. And with the Ocean, it was always this very technical approach already. We played to a click track, we had sequenced lighting, and everything was a lot more challenging in a technical way. So I really enjoyed the pleasure of just like having a loud old amp to plug into and play a riff, so that was awesome. But yeah, now it's just unrealistic. I think now it would be something very psychedelic, and maybe playing my new microtonal guitar, which I have here in the back, that I'm trying to learn how to play, and it's a fucking disaster. But a good guy, Michel Moser, built this instrument for me because I got really interested in in Anatolian music, where microtonal instruments are being used traditionally, but also what King Gizzard are doing with it on some of their records, like especially the KG and the LW record, were some discoveries, some recent discoveries of mine that I got really, really into. Yeah, so it would probably be some weird microtonal psychedelic rock.
Although for the uninitiated, it would sound like strange, but I can imagine you doing that, because I think if you do that, you have to have a certain level of talent.
It's a beast to learn how to play. It's very unintuitive. There's too much visual information because of the double fretboards in the fretboard. But yeah, it's a challenge.
We've spoken about the concept, and let's make it clear. Basically, you have now run out of Earth periods, right? So and you've already done a few other ideas on concept albums. Are you already thinking of new concept or of anything new that you can apply onto the next record? Or are you right now only enjoying Holocene?
No, I am not thinking about the next album concept yet. And that being said, the next album is already written, and I'm actually very excited about starting to work on that. There were actually two albums written at the same time. One of them was Holocene, and there's another album. Holocene was pretty much songs or original ideas that Peter, our synth guy, wrote by himself. And then he sent them to me, and when I heard them, I felt inspired to do things with them. But in the beginning, we weren't even sure if this was going to be for the Ocean or for some other project, you know, because it was mostly synths and quite different in the fact that it lacked guitars and the usual instruments that we use within this band, but at the same time, it had that vibe. And when he sent me those tracks, I had already been working on my own album, so to speak, for the weeks before. We're talking about like mid-lockdown, late 2020, a time when there was nothing going on and there was too much time to write music. So we were all writing music, and yeah, so I had been,
I mean, like even your drummer wrote some stuff.
Exactly. Paul made the fan record. Peter was working on Holocene, and then later with me, and I was working on another Ocean album already. And that album is written, but it's not recorded yet. And I honestly don't know when we will have the time to record it, because now the focus is on Holocene and we want to tour with it. And we feel that it really represents where we are as a band in 2023. So we're very excited about finally playing those tracks live. And we've just only started, you know. So yeah, that all that is just like taking up all my energy right now. So I haven't really started thinking about the lyrical approach to that second record yet. I can tell you for sure it will be something different. The paleontology thing is a thing of the past. Like it's dead beaten, and
literally a thing of the past.
Exactly, very literally. Yeah, it was a great endeavor, but Phanerozoic 2 was supposed to be the last record already, and then we decided to dive into it and add another chapter to it with Holocene, mainly because the music of Holocene connected very well with the end of Phanerozoic 2. It felt like a logical continuation, and it felt like, okay, that has to be another chapter, you know. But that's it. It's a promise. Like, you won't hear anything Earth history related from us anymore.
Yeah, it just struck me. I think it's like, what, 5, 6 albums that you did on that concept. Let me guess, you've never set out to do all of those, right?
It was Precambrian, Phanerozoic 1, Phanerozoic 2, and now Holocene. So that makes it 4. But that's already a lot in a catalog of like 12 records or 11 records, actually. So yeah.
But you never set out to do that, right?
No.
When you wrote
No, Precambrian was the first one, and it was like a record that was closed in itself somehow. You know, after that, I moved on to the Centric records, which had like very different lyrical territories, basically. But when I wrote Phanerozoic 1 in 2018, so 10 years later, that album was released. I wrote it in 2016, so like 8 years later, I realized it was connecting with Precambrian in a way musically, and at the same time, there was still this open eon that we hadn't covered, the Phanerozoic, so it made sense to continue there. But it wasn't a plan I plotted out when I wrote Precambrian. It was something that became an option much later, actually.
You've already mentioned Pelagial and the Centric albums, which focus on very, very different things. And then the question is, does music nowadays for you have to be more than an assembly of songs, but it has to have an overarching theme?
For me, it does, clearly. But that doesn't apply to things I listen to. I can also listen to very light music that, where every track has a different agenda. And that's totally fine. But for me, when I write music, I like to have that thread or that backbone, that red thread that goes through a record. I kind of need it for myself to focus and to get deeply involved, and I always like to have that somehow. But yeah, like I said, that's me writing, not me appreciating music necessarily.
So I mean, you've said that, you know, when you wrote Phanerozoic, it was an option to do an elongation of the paleontological theme. When you did that, and I mean, like, I'm very sure that once you've started Holocene as the last chapter of it, was there a kind of relief when you finished writing and recording Holocene, so that you for yourself could also say, okay, now done?
Yeah, absolutely. We felt accomplished when we, like, especially when the album was mixed, because that was such a tiresome process, because we were like, there was a moment when we thought we were chasing ghosts, that like what we were looking for in terms of sound didn't really exist, and we got a bit carried away and lost and frustrated because of that, especially Peter and me. So when it was finally mixed and done, it felt like a great relief. Like, this is the closing of an era. It's the album actually does sound how we always wanted it to sound. So, you know, like we felt very good about that. And now it's nice because it's time for something new. It's kind of like a blank page in front of you. You know, it's following these conceptual albums is also always like it ties you up, you know. It's not just liberating. It also means that you're limited in your choice of topics or in your choice of approaches, and everything is kind of like predefined, and you have to stick with it. And I do find that a great challenge, and I really enjoy it. But it's also nice and liberating now to start a new album as a blank page, and like knowing it could be anything, and just seeing what happens. So yeah.
Quick question: would you ever set out to do a cycle like that again, or do you feel like, no, that was too much?
No, I wouldn't say that. Like I said, I do enjoy getting deeply involved with you know, certain topics or concepts or whatever, and exploring them. And it's all been things that I find genuinely interesting. It's not that I go to the library and see what other weird shit can I write about. It's all things that I think about a lot anyways. You know, like the Centric Records
Dawkins
were a very different topic, obviously. Dealing with more philosophical questions and the legacy of Christianity, and it's all things I find extremely interesting to think about, to read about, and so it's always things that are very close to me, and like the whole Earth history stuff as well. I study geology. I've always been intrigued by rocks and Earth history and paleontology, so it's not things I need to wreck my brains much about. It's things that come quite naturally.
Would you say that you're more of a history buff or a philosophy nerd?
Is that
or would you say one doesn't go without the other?
Yeah, the latter. I was just about to say. I mean, philosophy can't get by without history. Obviously, it's essentially grounded in history and needs history in order to come to conclusions that are relevant, and so you can't really separate them. But I was looking into studying history, and I got too bored. I couldn't do that. Not because I wasn't interested in the historic facts and the conclusions, but it is a bit of a different focus and emphasis and a different approach from philosophy, obviously, which involves a bit more replication of facts and analysis of facts, and a bit less I was about to say creative thinking, but that would be the wrong term, because philosophy is not necessarily meant to be creative. It's also meant to be analytical, obviously. But yeah, the two can't live without one another. But I guess I feel more geared towards philosophy than towards history if I had to make a choice of study subjects.
So for all the kids out there who are still thinking about what to study, little me studied history, and it is funny.
No, don't study any of this. It won't get you anywhere. It's
well, somebody's running a big label. Somebody's just a teacher. Okay. But I have a few more questions, and that is something that you already hinted at. You've spoken about in your choice of records, you've spoken about the differences between, for example, Sig of It All and Tori Amos. And for some people, that seems like a paradox, I would assume. But it strikes me that, for example, on Heliocentric, you show that, or you solve that paradox very, very nicely, especially if, and one of my favorite songs that I also very often use in my history classes, in Ptolemy Was Wrong, which at first is seemingly a very, very light track, but then all of a sudden, when some of the harder notes are kicked and are really hit hardly, then it's one of the hardest things that, to me, you've done, because you reduced the amount of instrumentation, but didn't give in on the level of heaviness. Is that like a good example to show your paradox? You're also maybe paradox thinking?
Maybe it is. You tell me. I think writing music is essentially, for me, always the challenge of consolidating and uniting paradoxes in a way that is in a way that functions most of all, but that is also like just emotionally strong and meaningful. But dealing with paradoxes and not being shy or afraid of them, but like trying to embrace them, is something that is integral to writing music for me. And I think a lot of the bands I mentioned, they epitomize that. Like, look at a band like Refused with that album Shape of Punk to Come that we spoke about. You know, it's full of paradoxes, like from the beginning to the end. It's full of things that when you tell someone about it, everyone would shake their head and say, this is not possible, this is going to be fucking weird, and just like try hard, you know, and like doesn't go together. And well, it does, you know. And if you're not trying it, and if you're too afraid of trying things with the risk of failing, then you're not going to achieve greatness. Simply as that.
Yeah.
Greatness implies failure to some degree, you know, like trying something and falling on your face over and over again, but always getting back up on your feet and adjusting certain things, trying, also not making the same mistake 2 or 3 times, obviously, but adjusting things and trying again, and then eventually succeeding. This is this is where true greatness lies, I think. And especially when it comes to writing music and creating art, it's experimenting essentially means failure. Very important, and a very important lesson to not get frustrated by it and say, this didn't work, I wasted so much time on this idea and it was a dead end road. Well, this happens. This is part of the process, you know. Like, don't fucking cry. It's meant to be that way.
But coming back to Ptolemy Was Wrong,
so many hours of ideas that I recorded that never made it into any song, and some of them are probably at least good, maybe not great, but at least good ideas, but they didn't lead anywhere, or they didn't materialize into songs, or they got stuck somewhere because they weren't finished, and at the same time the next step never happened, or it was missing, so they stay drafts forever on hard drives that no one will ever listen to, you know. And if you are getting frustrated by that, then you shouldn't be an artist or a musician, you know. It's just an integral part of the process. As long as there are albums coming out, and as long as, or books being written, or, you know, paintings being created, that's always a part of the process.
Something that I saw when I looked again through your discography, and I'll also listen to the catalog for today, it strikes me that there are a lot of cinematic elements in it, or elements where you say, okay, that would be perfect for a movie. Could you see your band or yourself soundtracking a movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that in an ideal world where I don't run a record label with 2 releases per month and a touring band. I would love to do that. I would generally love to compose more, in a, not in a free way as I do for the band, but in a way where I follow certain external guidelines. I find it very intriguing, and I haven't really done much of that. And like writing a film score would be something like that, you know, where you have where you're limited from the outside in terms of what you can do, how much time you have to express something, you know. That, like, that's a great, that I can see that as a great challenge. But my problem is that like these days I barely touch my guitar unless I play with the ocean or I record, and I just don't have enough time to just sit down and write and compose. And I'm working on changing that and letting go of a lot of responsibilities that are still part of my daily work for Pelagic, that I want to get rid of, because they keep me from doing that, from getting up in the morning and just spending a couple of hours writing music, which I used to do for all of my 20s, and now I haven't been doing that for almost 10 years. And I'm only writing when I'm in album writing mode, then very intensely for the duration of 4 or 6 weeks I write a record, but then that's it. And then it's all just like the live reality of playing already stuff you already know, you know. And so yeah, it's just that, really. It's a matter of time. But I would love to write a film score. Absolutely. It would probably be horrible, but just
would you have a preferred genre
for the enjoyment?
Would you have a preferred genre to write for? Movie genre?
I'm not sure. I would have to think about that. It wouldn't be a comedy, that's for sure. But it could be very different things. It could be, could even be like for a cool documentary movie, but it could also be something very dark and horror and heavy, but or something with a David Lynch vibe, I think would be very fitting, you know, something brooding and intellectually heavy, but at the same time ambiguous and full of places to go astray and to just like get lost and see what happens. But yeah, no preferred category here.
You've just mentioned places, and that is something that also is very obviously important to you and to the band. You seem to like to go to places far outside the normal world or the hectic Western civilization to record stuff. You've just mentioned Northern Finland. I know that, wasn't it Iceland where you went to once to record something?
Yeah, the Phanerozoic, the drum session for Phanerozoic
exactly.
in Iceland. Yeah.
Is that something that you enjoy as an add-on of the band, or is that something where you say, okay, this is necessary because that will lead to a certain product that I want to have?
It's a combination of both. So we always used to want to take ourselves out of our routine and environment when we started recording an album, because we believed that it's important actually to, you know, get out of everyday life and to be in order to be creative. And the drum session is always what defines an album, because the first thing that happens somehow. So when we went to Iceland, that was the idea. We wanted to go to a place we'd never been to before, be surrounded by epic natural beauty to start being creative and record drums for these 2 records. And that worked out very well. Now with Holocene, or basically since that recording session, which took place in early 2018, a lot of things have changed. For us, we built ourselves our own new rehearsal space in Berlin, which is part of the Pelagic warehouse and label dungeon as well. And Loic and me built ourselves a recording room there as well during the pandemic, where we recorded everything, like Holocene, pretty much everything except drums. And for drums, we have our synth player Peter's Place, who has a recording studio in the north of Germany, between Bremen and Hamburg, which is a beautiful place with a perfect drum room. It's a 12 by 12 meters square room with wood ceiling and floor, and just sounds amazing. So now, in the last couple of years, I think in my year, we have basically set up our own zone, and that makes things a lot easier and a lot cheaper, because as much as we loved going to Iceland and to all these places to record, you're always looking at the studio clock ticking away, you know, and having our own place means we can take the time we need to. And I spend more time working on vocals with Loic for Holocene than with any other record.
Yeah.
And that's because we have our place where our refuge where we can go to, and it's fucking great, you know. And that kind of like has taken the place, or has kind of like dominated now the approach of going to external places to record. Like we're self-contained now. We have our own setup, and it's great that it is that way, I believe. But yes, this was definitely why we wanted to do that in the past, to get out of our comfort zones and go to a new place, and you know, start an album with a fresh, open mind in a different, beautiful place. And we've always loved that, and it's also why we always loved traveling and touring with the band, you know, to experience that.
Last question before we come to our infamous quickfire round. You have done 2 collaborative EPs. One with Burst, I think, 2008, 2009, something like that? And one with Mono in 2015. Interestingly, I remember when I looked up, or when I rethought about it, you know, back with Burst, I would say you were the junior partner. With Mono, it was equals. But could you imagine doing a collaboration where you are the, for lack of a better word, bigger band, where you take a somewhat smaller band onto your wings?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't matter how important or significant or big an artist is. And I mean, I work with a lot of smaller bands on Pelagic that are amazing at what they do, and where I could imagine this very well. Absolutely. It also needs to be said that these were not really collaborations in the sense that we actually recorded genuine music together. It was basically just split EPs.
Split EPs, so,
like Mono contributed a track, and we did. And the same was true for Burst back then. It wasn't collaborations as, for example, the track we did for the Lustmord collaboration that I released on Pelagic last year. Last year, exactly. So that was more like something where new, genuine music was written with external material coming from someone else.
By the way, it just strikes me, basically the Lustmord collaboration album is your version of a Judgment Night.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool, having a Lustmord version of Just Another Victim. My little crazy mind would love that. Okay, Robin, first of all, thanks for all this.
I can pitch the idea to him.
So first of all, thanks for those insights. And of course, nobody ever leaves a Veil of Sound interview without having to go through the infamous quickfire round. So you will get two alternatives, and you have to choose between AC versus DC, Phanerozoic 1 versus 2, year versus light. You know what I mean. Let's start off with something simple.
All right.
Berghain versus SO36.
It's a tough one. That's a very tough one because I actually enjoy both, and both have a very important right to existence, both in my personal life and in general. Yeah.
For everybody outside of Berlin or outside of Germany, Berghain might be one of the most famous, for lack of a better word, clubs in Germany, and SO36, SO36 might be, I'm not sure, but I could imagine it's one of the oldest still running punk places, punk/hardcore places in all of Germany.
I can tell you when I was the last time at either of those places, maybe,
okay.
so they maybe guide to an answer. So the last time I was at SO36, I believe was watching Quicksand just before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Was it after the I think it was before the pandemic, so it must have been
19.
Early 2020.
Yeah.
Or
okay.
late 2019, early 2020. I believe that was the last time I went to SO. We've played there with the Ocean many times, and it's a great old 800 cap punk room in Berlin. So I like going there. And my last time at Berghain, I believe, was also just before the pandemic. I haven't been back since after the pandemic. It's not a place I go to regularly, but occasionally I do definitely enjoy a good night out in that environment. But recently I've been going to slightly different parties.
We don't want to know where, otherwise you'll be stalked. Dillinger Escape Plan. I'll give you two records and you have to choose one of them. Calculating Infinity versus Ironworks.
Oh, again, a very fucking tough one. Very fucking tough one. Everyone's gonna hate me when I say Ironworks, but no, I do love Calculating Infinity. Of course, was what got me into them, and it was probably the most shaping album they've done. But I believe Ironworks is a great fucking album with great songs that shows a band at the top of their game. So
I think Ironworks. I also think Ironworks is the one which has a more diverse set of songs. I mean, like Milk Lizard is just fucking amazing, and there are many good ones on them. Black Bubblegum, but of course, everybody will hate us for that. I know you're a book buff. I know you like to read. So, and I know you've already done one of the Russian greats with with a reference to the brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky. So Leo Tolstoy versus Anton Chekhov.
I haven't read books by either of them, so that's your call to pick.
Fortunately, I did. It must be Tolstoy. It must be Tolstoy. I like his.
I've read a bit of Tolstoy in school, but yeah, never since. So that's like 35 years ago.
It would be Tolstoy and Leo Tolstoy. I know, but there's another Tolstoy who's a Russian author, but must be Leo for me. I'm not sure whether you dived really deep into those, as you've mentioned that you got into post-rock in 2002. Mogwai versus Godspeed You Black Emperor.
Ooh. Yeah, it'll be Godspeed, but it's again like a tough call to make. Lift Your Skinny Fists is definitely an album that should have been in my list that I have not talked about today, but it belongs there. But Come On Dayang should equally be in that list. And that was actually before, like I told you that I got into post-rock with Mono, One Step More and You Die, but I think that was around the same time, or maybe even a bit earlier, actually. Yeah.
Which one? Come On Dayang?
Come Want to Come On Die Young must have been also around that time, 2002?
Somewhere around the millennium. It's not 2002, I know that, because there is
Maybe
like one
earlier,
or two. Yeah. There is auto rock after Come On You Die Young, and then there is this Mr. Beast, and I know for sure that Mr. Beast is somewhere around 2004, if I remember correctly, because it was at the time when
Rock Action also.
Yeah, Rock Action is also in there. Yeah, so it's like that is my favorite mono record, Rock Action, forever.
Yeah.
When listening to electronic music, it's funny that there are two guys with the same name. So Paul Kalkbrenner versus Fritz Kalkbrenner.
Not a huge fan of
either of them, right? But if you had to choose,
no, that's, I don't know. Not really familiar. More familiar with Paul, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, it's not the type of electronic music that gets me very excited these days.
What are the electronic artists, or one or two of them, that get you excited nowadays?
I'm listening to a lot of Oriental infused down-tempo stuff. Like Ray and Kjavik, for example. I've been listening to that record a lot. A lot of cool stuff coming out of Berlin right now from the Rebellion der Träumer collective, and yeah, I'm a lot into the moody, atmospheric, yeah, more slow side of electronic music. So I'm a bit of a hippie on that end, I have to say.
Then let's go the total other way, not slow, not down tempo. Let's go to Boris. Heavy rocks or Absolute Ego?
I guess Heavy Rocks.
Uniform versus The Body.
Oh, I will go for The Body. Yeah, the sheer ferocity of that kid with his weird voice, and seeing that live was something very, very fresh and inspiring for me many years ago already. Yeah.
The Stooges versus the Melvins.
That'll be the Melvins, and that's simply a matter of age, I guess. I wasn't around when the Stooges were around. If I had been, it would have probably been a different story. But I do have a relationship with the Melvins that also goes back to the 90s, and it's also been a band that I've always appreciated a lot for their not giving a fuck about what people think about them, and writing some of the most fresh and inspiring, heavy, groovy music there is.
Did you hear the latest rumor about them? Which, folks, when you're listening, it might already have become a wet dream come true. But did you hear the latest rumor what they are about to do? They said that they might do an all-electronic tribute album to Throbbing Gristle. No guitars.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
I want to hear it.
As you mentioned your love for trip-hop, two artists that came out of the realm but moved a little bit away from it. Tricky versus Goldie.
Yeah, Tricky just released an incredible track last year with Trentemøller that has been on heavy rotation for me. Very cool, very intriguing collaboration, and that's a guy I would like to do something with, that I could actually imagine very well. So I would pick Tricky here.
You mentioned that you also liked some US hip-hop back in the 90s. So I'm not sure if you know both of them, but they definitely have two of my favorite rappers of all time. Eric B. and Rakim versus Gangstar.
Yeah, both good choices again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So which one would you choose?
Gangstar.
Okay, then I choose Eric B. and Rakim.
Right on.
And the last one, and I'm not sure if I interpreted your Twitter handle correctly, but I hope I do. And I hope it's a reference not to the hardcore band, but to the comics. The Avengers versus Guardians of the Galaxy.
No point of interest whatsoever.
Oh, then I misunderstood it. Okay. So, then, of course, if I have to choose, it's always the Avengers. Robin, thanks for all your time. Thanks for this cool interview. When is the next tour of the ocean going to be?
We're heading out tomorrow to Romania for Rockstedt Festival, then to Portugal for Comendatio Fest, and then we're going to South Africa and to Australia in early September. And then we are heading out in Europe at the end of September with This Will Destroy You.
Do you already have any plans, as this is released in December, do you already have any tour plans that you could disclose here for 2024?
No, that would be too early. We're gonna be touring in 2024. I can tell you that. But yeah, now the rest of the year is ahead of us. We have some festivals coming up, like I said, and then a big European tour. We're definitely going to look at coming back to the States in early 2024, but that's still in the early stages of planning.
So, folks, if you see some kind of announcement underneath this one, then they already announced something for 2024. For wherever, we'll include it in our little publication here. Robin, thanks for all your time. I hope it was a little bit enjoyable. I know it's promo stuff that someone has to do.
Oh, yeah, man.
For everybody, if you liked this one, if you like the other stuff that we're doing on this marathon, maybe give us a subscription, maybe give us a like on Facebook or on Instagram. Drop us a line which artist we should interview, or which artist we should have done a second or third interview with. So maybe we can get Robin on for records 11 to 20. Or otherwise, just drop us a line. On our website, you can find the link to our Patreon. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And Robin, for you, chance for final last words.
That's it. I had too many words already in the past 2 hours, so I will leave you with a wavy bye-bye. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and see you out there somewhere.
Hopefully. So take care.
Ciao, ciao.